How are you? Friday, August 13th, 2021, episode 270. Best hitters and pitchers, 1880 to 1889, that decade, 10 years. This series of episodes will focus on the best hitters of the decade of 1880 to 1889, a 10-year period. Also, the best pitchers, who put up the best numbers. This is interesting. The last episode was 1870 to 1879. This one, 1880, 1889. Who had the most hits, most RBIs, best batting average? Well, according to my list here, Cap Hansen had the most hits, 1,518 during that 10-year period. Who had the most RBIs? Cap Hansen, 967 in 10 years. It's almost 100 RBIs a year. And then he had his best season was 399 batting. Who was second? Should mark these off once I do it. Who was second? Roger Connor, 1,404 hits, 693 RBI, and his best year was 371. So I've got Connor, Hansen. Who was next? Had a really good decade. King Kelly, 1,344 hits, 692 RBIs, 388. Next, Dan Brothers, 1,343 hits, 701 RBI, 373 was his best year. Next, Jim O'Rourke, 1,279 hits, 508 RBIs, 347 his best year. Next, who had a good decade? John Montgomery Ward, 1,164 hits, 511 RBIs. His high batting average for that decade, 338. And you got some other guys on the list here who played in the decade, and then they also played in the next decade. So I wanted to see what they did in this decade, 1880 to 1889. Bid McPhee, 961 hits, 448 RBI, 289 batting average. Bid McPhee. Next guy during this decade, Sam Thompson came up. 661 hits, 450 RBI, 372 his best year. And you got some guys who are just getting going. Let's see. Tommy McCarthy, 406 hits, 151 RBI, 291. And you get Hugh Duffy comes up during this decade, gets 266 hits, 130 RBI, 312. You get Jake Beckley comes up, 254 hits, 124 RBI, 343. And then you get a guy named Ed Delante, just starting off, 138 hits, 58 RBI, 293. But his next decade is outstanding. So those are the hitters. Did you catch them all? During that decade, Camp Hansen, Jim O'Rourke, King Kelly, Roger Connor, Dan Brothers, John Montgomery Ward. Then you get Jake Beckley, Ed Delante, Hugh Duffy, Billy Hamilton. Forgot him. Billy Hamilton came up that decade too. 195 hits, 88 RBI, 301 average, best. Tommy McCarthy, Big McPhee, Sam Thompson. So these hitters are starting to play ball. Camp Hansen was in the last decade, and he's in this decade, and he's also in the next decade. How about pitchers? Who had a good decade? Bud Calvin, 287 wins, 4,693 innings, 1,526 strikeouts. So Bud Calvin was the pitcher of the decade, 1880 to 1889. Next on the list, Tim Keefe. He had more wins, but he had less innings. So Calvin wins in innings, Keefe wins in wins. 291 wins for Tim Keefe during the decade. But you got to give it to Calvin for having 500 more innings. Keefe, 4,195 innings. Calvin had 4,693. Keefe had 2,219 strikeouts. So maybe you can say that Keefe and Calvin were the dominant pitchers of the 1880s. Next on the list, Mickey Welsh, 285 wins, 4,344 innings, 1,706 strikeouts. So Calvin, Keefe, and Mickey Welsh. Another guy during that decade, 1880s. Charlie Old Hoss Radbourn, 271 wins, 3,966 innings, 1,696 strikeouts. Another guy during that decade, significant, was John Clarkson, 220 wins, 2,857 innings, 1,470 strikeouts. Another guy who was just coming up, Amos Rusi, 12 wins, 225 innings, 105 strikeouts, just get going. And Jay Chesbro gets going too, 6 wins, 149 innings, 28 strikeouts. So the dominant pitchers through the 1880s, Tim Keefe, Bud Calvin, Mickey Welsh, Charlie Old Hoss Radbourn, John Clarkson, and then you get Amos Rusi and Jake Chesbro. What do you think of that decade, 1880s? 1880 to 1889. Next decade, we got some super ball players coming up. So we'll cover that next. Thanks for watching. I'm out.